So we're going to start off with a presentation on hydration, and then we'll get into conversations on some other factors when working in the heat. So before we get started, let's do a brief introduction. My name is Joanne Davis, Safety Advisor at the Regina office. Steve, do you mind going next?
Hi, yeah, I'm Steve Waldbar, Safety Advisor, also at the Regina office. Yeah, but my region is south of the #1, so hopefully see you soon.
My name is Laura Lodge. I am a safety advisor as well out of the Regina office. Right now, I'm kind of centralized to Regina, and I've been with the association for about 6 years now.
My name's Kieran. I'm also a safety advisor. The only difference is I work out of Saskatoon. I deal with a few different regions, so if you need help in Prince Albert, Macklin, Humboldt, or around Saskatoon, I'm your guy.
Thank you so much. So that's our panelist for today. Before we get started, I do want to mention that we do have training that is available. So through this pandemic, we made a quick response and took our training to instructor-led online training. It is a replicate of a traditional classroom training experience. So you're going to have the internet and phones and tablets that you're going to use instead of coming and sitting at our desks. Don't mistaken this for just computer-based training. Instructor-led sessions are facilitated by our training technicians. So there is an engaging training experience. They do have real-time dialogue between the facilitators and the attendees. There is group work sessions that are done in breakout rooms, as well as presentation, and they also have practical components such as even in fall protection, you do have a practical component to inspect your harness and don your harness. So we are recreating that experience from the classroom to instructor-led online training. So take a look at our website, see the upcoming classes, and it's the exact same training that you're going to get as if you're in our classrooms. Okay, so now let's carry on. I am going to do a presentation on hydration. As working in heat, hydration is very important. So I am going to get a slideshow going and go through a few slides with you. Okay. So we have hydration. So let's talk about how much water you should be drinking. It is a question that we have quite honestly looked at quite a few times through industry. You have many different recommendations over the years, and factors that do affect it are your health, even activities you're doing, as well as where you live. There is no single formula that fits for everyone. But you do need to know more about your body's needs for fluids, and this will help you estimate how much you should be drinking. There are quite a few benefits of drinking an adequate amount of water. Water is your body's principal chemical component. It makes up about 60% of your body weight. Your body depends on water to survive. Every cell, tissue, organ in your body needs water to work properly. For example, water helps get rid of waste. It keeps your temperature normal. It helps lubricate and cushion your joints and protects sensitive tissues. A lack of water can lead to dehydration, a condition that occurs when you don't have enough water in your body to carry out normal functions. Even mild dehydration can leave you drained of your energy and make you tired. So there are factors that influence your water needs. You might need to modify your total fluid intake based on a couple of different factors. Exercise. If you do any activity that makes you sweat, you need to drink extra water to cover the lost fluid. It's important to drink water before, during, and after a workout. And if the exercise is intense and lasts more than an hour, sports drink can also help replace minerals in your blood, your electrolytes. That is lost through sweat. Environmental. So if you're working in hot, humid weather that can make you sweat, require additional fluids intake. Dehydration can also occur at high altitudes. Your overall health also affects how much water you need. If you have a fever, vomiting, etc., you're going to need to drink more water. Another thing to take note is all these conditions do apply to construction. You're working long hours, Especially in the summer, you're working outside, right? You're going to want to make sure you increase that water. Okay, so let's find the balance. So if you have heard, drink 8 ounces of water a day. Okay, so that would look like this. So we have our 8 glasses. That's easy to remember. It's a reasonable goal. Most healthy people can stay hydrated by drinking water and other fluids whenever they feel thirsty. According to the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, however, the average person does require approximately 13 glasses of water a day. So let's add a few more glasses. There's our 13. So you have 8 between 13 glasses of water in total for an easy workload when working indoors or in a shaded area. The body requires fluid to control temperature and maintain muscle function. Saskatchewan Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 76 does state that the employer contractor must provide clean and readily available drinking water for workers. Now that if you're faced with temperatures like what we have seen during the summer, let's say 35 degrees, you're going to require to drink even more water. Up to, give it a second, I believe 33 glasses. If you're going to be working in high temperatures, you're going to be sweating a lot, losing a lot of fluids. So this represents 200 ounces of water that most people would require on a hot day when working an 8-hour day. And that includes breaks. But water is not the only liquid you're consuming. So let's say you have your cup of coffee in the morning. Due to its dietary effects, you would actually need to increase your water by a couple glasses. And let's just say you had high sugar cola. Again, dietary effects, you would actually have to increase your water again. So that's quite a bit of water for your daily intake. You do not want to be drinking this all at once, obviously. It's important to drink water in small amounts from the time to time to ensure that we do not drink too much too fast. You want to drink before you feel thirsty, and by the time you feel thirsty, you're becoming dehydrated. Keep in mind that this is recommended from the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. And depending on the work conditions, age, size, your suggested water intake may vary. Okay. You can get water from other sources besides just drinking water. You can also get fluids from what you eat. So here we have a good example. Watermelon is 92% water. Cantaloupe is 90%. You also have celery, 95%. Water is definitely good if you're already eating because it's calorie free. Depending on what you're doing, you might need the extra calories as well when you're working. Sports drinks should only be used when you're exercising intensely for more than an hour. These drinks can help replace electrolytes through the loss of perspiration and sugar needs for energy during longer bouts of exercise. Energy drinks and sports drinks are different, so do keep that in mind. To stay safely hydrated, your fluid intake is probably adequate if you rarely feel thirsty, your urine is colorless or light yellow. A doctor or registered dietitian can help you determine the amount of water that's right for you every day if you are concerned with that. Prevent dehydration, make sure your body has the fluids it needs. Make water your beverage of choice. It's a good idea to have drink a glass of water and other calorie-free, low-calorie beverages with each meal and in between each meal. Drink before and after exercise, like mentioned earlier. Drink water if you're feeling hungry. Thirst can also be confused with hunger. Although it is possible to drink too much water when your kidneys can't excrete the excess water, it is rare. There are heat-related sicknesses too. I'm going to go through quickly with you. So everyone has probably experienced symptoms of heat-related illnesses at some point. So this 220 represents 220 people that die from occupational heat stress in North America every year. Signs and symptoms, you can recognize overexposure. They may show signs of heat exhaustion. This can be excessive sweating, loss of water caused by dehydration. Heat exhaustion can present itself through a variety of symptoms: nausea, headache, extreme thirst, high body temperature, and dizziness. Heat exhaustion left untreated can lead to heat stroke, an illness that arises when the body core temperature reaches higher than 40 degrees Celsius. It can present itself with a variety of symptoms, including disorientation, lack of sweat, which can lead to unconsciousness, and organ failure or death if immediate action is not taken. We need to prevent ourselves and others from heat exposure by ensuring proper hydration. Previously, we spoke about proper hydration. Now let's take a look at a little bit more of the signs and symptoms of these heat-related illnesses. Heat stroke, what you want to look for is high body temperature, hot, red, dry, or damp skin, fast, strong pulse. You could have a headache, dizziness, nausea, confusion, and you could lose consciousness as well. What you need to do is call 911 right away. It is a medical emergency. You want to move the person to a cooler place and help lower the person's temperature with cold cloths or a cool bath. And do not give the person anything to drink. Next, you have heat exhaustion. Again, you're going to have heavy sweating, cool, pale, clammy skin, fast, weak pulse this time, nausea, vomiting, muscle cramps, tiredness and weakness, dizziness, headache, and fainting. What you want to do for heat exhaustion is move to a cool place, loosen the clothes, put cool, wet cloths on your body or take a cold bath, and sip water. You do need medical help right away if you are throwing up, the symptoms get worse, or if they last longer than an hour. You can also have heat cramps. These are no fun. Heavy sweating during intense exercise, and you're going to have muscle pain or spasm. Stop the physical activity and move to a cool place if this happens. Drink water or a sports drink. Wait for cramps to go away before you do any more physical activity. And you do need medical help if the cramps last longer than an hour. You could be low on sodium, or if you're on a low sodium diet, and if you have heart problems as well, in correlation with your heat cramp. Couple more left: sunburn, painful, red, warm skin, blisters on the skin. What you want to do is stay out of the sun until your sunburn heals. Put cool cloth, sunburn area, take a cool bath, put moisturizing lotion on the sunburn area, and do not break the blisters. We will talk a little bit more about this later. This is just if you already have the sunburn, what you need to do. And heat rash. This is going to be red clusters of small blisters that look like pimples on the skin, usually on the neck, chest, groin, or elbow creases. Again, here you want to stay in a cool, dry place, keep the rash dry, and use powder like baby powder to soothe the rash. Next thing we want to look at when it comes to working in the heat, as well as work and rest periods. When it's raining, most contractors will often put work outside off if possible, because it can be dangerous. The same thing applies to when you're working in heat. However, usually when you have sunny conditions, that's usually the best time for us to get our work done. So we do have to be careful and make sure we still have precautions to meet the needs when we have high heat, high temperature weather. But we are taking adequate breaks and drinking plenty of water. In 2016, the City of Regina Manager of Workplace Health and Safety stated that when the humidex values are between 32 and 37 range, we ask our employees to take 15 minutes of rest and have a 45 minutes of work. This is a policy created by the city to use several factors to determine what's right for their employees. So this is, you can find different charts to tell you how long you should be resting and how long you should be working depending on the temperature. And we actually do have that chart as part of our toolbox talk. However, we're going to be going through this toolbox talk on Tuesday, Toolbox Talks, August 25th. So tune in then and we'll go through in detail working in hot weather toolbox talk then. Okay, so that is the presentation on hydration. Do I have any comments from our panelists? Okay, so okay, I do have another PowerPoint that I'm going to bring up, and we're going to talk about some other factors. We talked a little bit about hydration, so I'll just share that with you. Okay, as a construction industry, we are working in the heat quite a bit, and it's usually hard, laborious work, and it's very important to take care of ourselves. So the first slide here is a little bit on hydration. Here are some examples of having cool water available for workers with these types of coolers. What are some other suggestions we can give companies with providing enough water for their workers?
Hey, hi, my camera seems to not be working here again, but just providing, one thing to remember is that we are living in COVID times here a little bit. So when you are providing that water for your workers, I highly recommend that we're not sharing one great big water cooler or anything like that. We do have to take extra precautions. So hydration, huge. Your guys should definitely have water on hand available. Things we used to do is, I mean, it's important to have water for them, but asking guys to bring their own water jugs from home, refillable, is a great idea. You know, most people are accommodating to do that. So they would even start with their own full water bottle, and then on a hot day, it's impossible to bring enough water, especially Joanne, like you talked about the 13 to 18 glasses somebody might need in a day given what they had, right? So they start with that water bottle and then just have a policy in place to get that their jug refilled throughout the day, right? So I would say that that's a huge consideration.
Go ahead, Laura. Do you have, okay, no?
Another important thing to remember about drinking lots of water, like we might sweat out as much as 8 kilograms of water in a day, meaning you need 30 glasses of water. So what gives you muscle cramps isn't the loss of water from your body, it's the loss of salt and mineral. So in the course of a normal day, we as humans have enough salt in our diet to replace that. But in the middle of a day during the construction hours, and we're spending 8 hours shoveling or doing hard labor, we've exhausted that mineral capacity in our body. So what we need to do is have some sort of electrolyte, that being some sort of snack, something with salt in it to replenish that. Water on its own will not help you with cramps.
That is a great point, Kieran. I know that my dad is retired now, but he did mining, and he would always have tomato juice just because it had a little extra salt content. So he'd be drinking a little extra tomato juice to help with that. So that is a great point to add. Yeah, I've had a couple companies actually call me and say, how do we provide water with COVID? And so sometimes they have the big jug that you'd have a pump on, but they keep that sanitized. So it has to be wiped down. Somebody would fill up their bottle. Everybody would have their own bottle, and then they sanitize it. Just because that is a valid point. As well, don't forget that if you are extremely thirsty, drinking room temperature water is actually better for you It may not be as satisfying as ice cold water but ice cold water can shock your system if you're overheating. So there is that point too, that don't always necessarily go for the coldest if you're actually extremely thirsty. You want something a little bit more room temperature. Okay, that's great points. Let's take a look at the next one here. Okay, so this is all about flammable material storage during the hot weather, working in hot conditions, and when we have flammable. Any comments on this?
Other than just people have to keep in mind that these products, chemicals and stuff, they can react with heat just like anything else, right? I'm sure a lot of people have seen the way a jerry can expands in heat if it's left outside. So they have to be vented, stuff like that. So yeah, keeping them, I mean, knowing what you have, knowing what's in the containers, whether or not it does well in the heat, knowing what's on that SDS.
Yeah, like Laura said, those fuels are volatile. So with that gas expanding, it does have a big risk or hazard of starting on fire. So keeping those things away from where people break, don't keep them in a room, don't keep them inside, keep them outside in a nice ventilated area. Sometimes we'll see those enclosed trailers that lots of us use that have a generator in them. And you pull the generator out, but the gas can stays in the vehicle or the enclosed trailer. So with that fumes in there, gas fumes are noxious and they replace air, as well as they create a lower and higher flammable limit. So we want to make sure that the storage of material is appropriate, ventilated, and we're able to get away from those things if we're on breaks or, like lots of us do, smoke.
Those are good points. Yeah, just to make sure you have that signage nearby, like that those signs are important, because like you said, you're ventilating them and you're storing them to the side. You know, have that designated smoking area, have it shaded, have it ventilated, all really good points.
Yeah, proper material storage is very important, as well as there is legislation as well that you need to actually know how much flammable material you have and where it's stored for your fire plan as well. And you do have nice containers that you can lock up and keep your flammable materials properly stored, so that's important too. Okay, so the next one I have here is quite interesting. Who can tell me what happened here?
You know, it's funny. The first thing I thought of when I looked at that picture was a cell phone battery, and then I looked over and I saw the alcohol-based squirt pump there, because it's amazing the different things that are flammable in your vehicle nowadays, and deciding on where you're going to put what and where to put it. It doesn't even necessarily have to be in direct sunlight. I mean, if you put if your car is enclosed at 23 degrees outside, it can get to 50 degrees inside. And then now add, you know, extra heat to that on a really like hot day. And there's, yeah, so for that to happen, that's not as uncommon as it used to be, especially now with everybody carrying that extra hand sanitizer and stuff on them. That's a big one. But like I said, you know, you put glasses on your countertop, different things can act differently in your vehicle to create even more heat.
Yes, for sure. Actually, with extended exposure to high temperatures, the alcohol in hand sanitizer will actually eventually evaporate, causing it to lose its efficiency. Additionally, there is potential for fire when storing hand sanitizer in your vehicle. In extreme heat, it can ignite due to the high alcohol content, and it does have a low flash point as well. So you do want to keep your hand sanitizer stored in a cool, dry place. And because of COVID-19, and we have extra procedures, policies in place, and we also carry hand sanitizer, you don't want to leave it in a hot vehicle. And I'm quite sure that's an extra risk that we all take we're all exposed to, whether it be with work or at home, because even myself, when I leave the house, go shopping, I bring hand sanitizer. Don't leave it in your vehicle, right? Just bring a small bottle, bring it with you. Okay. So here we're talking about exposure to heat, working in heat. Here we have some workers working, and you see that they have set up a temporary shade. Now, this is a great idea. When you're going to be working outside, sometimes we're working, I know sometimes working out there, there's no shade. Like you're working right under the direct heat and you can't go anywhere, right? This is one method. You could have a temporary shade. Have you guys seen or heard anything else that companies have been doing to help protect the workers?
Sunscreen. Wearing sunscreen is very important. As lots of us know, we can get sunburnt quite easily, even on cloudy days. The UV index doesn't necessarily care whether there's clouds in the way, because it is radiation. So protecting yourself with either long clothing on the arms, on the back of the neck, something to cover up your skin, and using proper SPS rated sunscreen, you will prevent yourself from a world of hurt when you get severe sunburn.
Exactly. No, that's a very good point. Another thing that you can do besides just having umbrellas is maybe do some of the work inside if possible, if you're putting something together, and then bring it outside. That's another
minimizing
way.
exposure.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost like party tents on sites too, right? You know, those white sort of square ones that don't have sides. I've seen those set up outside to give guys shade to work under.
No, that's an excellent idea. Yeah, besides just an umbrella, you can just cover a whole work area with that. Set it up once, right? No, that's great. Even protect you from the rain.
And it is amazing just how little pockets of shade will help. Like this umbrella, what a great idea. You know, I picture these guys working here. Two guys are working out on the rebar. That it's tough to protect yourself from the shade throughout the day all the time. Like that would require one huge tarp. But if you have stations set up, you know, especially where they're using chemicals, as you can see there, and that stuff shaded off, and you have, you know, you pick and choose your spots of where the guys might congregate a little more often, and you put shade in there. Like what a huge difference that can make throughout the day just to get those relief periods. And, you know, great spots to be storing your water and stuff like that too, right? Where it's not, you know, Joanne, you mentioned room temperature before. They don't, I'm sure you didn't mean like outside temperature on a 50-degree day, right? We're just talking normal temperature that you feel in the room right now. You don't want a shock of ice, but you also don't want it to be as warm as the day you're feeling. So,
Yeah, for sure. When you need you're extremely thirsty, it's not a good time to have like tea, right? Necessarily. You do want that water that's closest to your body temperature, right? You want it to absorb fast so your body doesn't have to work to change its temperature to be accommodating. So Kieran, on the next slide, you actually mentioned this, sunscreen. So sunburn, UV radiation exposure is a big thing for us construction workers as well. So here we have a couple extreme cases, right? So it can happen. I know personally for myself, even with wearing sunscreen, wearing safety glasses all the time, like I get that nice permanent look around my face that you know, you can see where my glasses were. And when working on every day, that I had that every summer. So you can imagine without sunscreen how bad it can be. And so here's a couple extreme cases. And Laura, I do believe you're going to go into a little bit more detail into UV radiation. So we're going to go a little deeper into this.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject. So the first thing I kind of like to back up to, and Kieran, you mentioned this a couple slides ago, is, you know, what is UV radiation exactly? So right now, what we're looking at here is a graphic that actually shows different forms of radiation and where they fit on the spectrum of radiation and their frequencies. So on this scale, humans have evolved to only see and use one very small piece of this scale, and that's the visible light. It's sort of in the middle underneath the sun there. So we use that light to see, and that's what gives us the ability to see all the colors of the rainbow. On the left side of the scale, you can see how the wavelengths are quite far apart. And so that's your microwaves, your radio waves, or your very low or extremely low frequency waves. And these waves generally in normal amounts, they don't even penetrate our bodies, so we don't really have to worry about them. On the very far side of the spectrum, you can see gamma rays, X-rays, and ultraviolet radiation. Gamma rays, they come from deep space. We're not coming across those very often. They're very, very powerful. X-rays, we use them every day in medical care, but in very, very, very small amounts. And then the ultraviolet rays. So that's what's actually coming down from the sun. Now, with the ultraviolet rays and X-rays and gamma rays, you can see at the bottom of that chart, it actually describes non-ionizing and ionizing radiation. And what that really means is that the ionizing radiation basically is so powerful, the photons inside of that radiation is so powerful that the items that it shines on or it affects actually begin those ions begin ripping apart the atoms inside of the items that they touch, right? So anything that's an ionizing type of radiation, it actually begins to rip apart the atoms that make up the structures that they're touching. So it's a very dangerous form of radiation. And a lot of people don't realize that the sun actually causes that. Can you go to the next slide there, Joanne? So on this graphic, you can kind of see what's happening when you're exposed to UV. So the sun comes down and we have squamous cells and basal cells, and those cells make up the first layer of your skin. Basal cells are the very first cells, and they basically move upwards, becoming squamous cells, and then eventually we shed them, and that's how we regenerate our skin every 28 days or so. In the basal cell layer, you'll see that there's what's called melanocytes. And these are organs that are not like skin cells. They do not divide and move up and shed. They're more similar to like a sweat gland in that they have a purpose, but they don't change and they don't divide. So those melanocytes, once your skin begins being burned by the UV radiation, the melanocytes' job is to release melanin, which raises to the top of your skin and makes it darker. And the purpose of that is to try and reduce the amount of radiation damage to the basal and squamous cells. Everybody has the same number of melanocytes in their body, but depending on your heritage and where you're from, is whether or not your body's able to actually produce enough melanin to try and reduce the amount of radiation damage done to those cells. People with light skin and light hair, they produce a lot less melanin, and so they're at higher risk of actually being burned by the radiation before their body is able to produce melanin to try and protect itself. So on this graphic, this one kind of shows what the depth that the UVAs or the UV rays actually travel. So there's actually 3 types of UV radiation. One we don't hear about much is UVC radiation, which is actually absorbed by the ozone layer. So we don't see it very often on the Earth. UVB radiation accounts for about 5% of the UV rays that actually hit the Earth. And they're a little bit weaker, and so they only go through that first layer of skin. So they go down into the epidermis and they don't generally go farther. At the bottom of the epidermis, where it meets the dermis, that's where your melanocytes are. Inside of the dermis is where you have collagen and elastin and the things that make up the structure of your skin. So UVA rays, they actually account for about 95% of what UV radiation hits the Earth. And those rays are extremely strong. And as you can see, they go much deeper than the epidermis and down into the actual structure of the skin. Like Kieran had mentioned, this is all radiation, right? So this is radiation damage getting through your body and starting to break down the cells that make up the epidermis and the dermis. So do you want to just jump to the next slide, Joanne? So in this image, what we're seeing is the differences between different forms of skin cancer. So in the little image there, you can see those dark red parts are the melanocytes. They're in that basal layer of skin, and then the squamous cells are further up. So basically what happens when you get sunburn is your skin goes through a repair process, and it has to decide whether or not the cells are worth saving, if they're savable or not. So if a cell is damaged beyond repair, it's programmed to die. If it's not quite damaged beyond repair and it tries to repair itself, but it does so unsuccessfully, that's called a mutation. And so what happens is these cells will repair themselves, and they'll repair themselves incorrectly, and suddenly the cell is telling itself to proliferate uncontrollably. And that's where you get cancer. So these cells are trying to fix themselves when they're not fixable, and suddenly you have a proliferation of cells, and that's not a good thing. Now, you have two different kinds of cancer there, the squamous and the basal cell carcinomas. Those are skin cells that have been damaged and have now become cancerous. What's different about melanoma is that melanoma is cancer of the melanocytes. And what happens when they are exposed to too much radiation is they begin dividing, and they're not supposed to divide. They're not supposed to break up. They're not supposed to create new ones. They're organs that are supposed to stay there and just be constant. And so melanoma is a cancer of those melanocytes that have decided in the process of trying to repair themselves that they're going to proliferate uncontrollably. The reason melanoma is so dangerous compared to the basal or the squamous cell carcinomas is because melanomas are generally closer to those, the dermis and the subcutaneous layers, and they tend to spread easier to other organs and metastasize through the body. And so that's why melanoma is considered one of the more dangerous forms of skin cancer. Okay. And yeah, I think go to the next slide there. And we just have a few, just some key points about the UV radiation thing. So a really common misconception about tanning is that it's the body's, natural defense to radiation, and that the more you tan, the more you're protected. And that is false. A tan, regardless of whether you're from, sub-Saharan Africa or you're from Sweden, provides only 2 to 3 sun protection factor at best. So it is a natural defense, but it is actually a direct response to mutations occurring in your DNA. So your DNA, your cells are being damaged beyond repair, and the tanning part of it is your body's only defense at trying to slow that process down. So again, UVB radiation, it penetrates the outermost layer of the skin, the epidermis, but UVA radiation penetrates a lot deeper. And it goes into those connective tissues of the skin, the collagen, the elastin, and it starts to break it down. And that's when you eventually get wrinkles and skin sagging from that radiation damage. Again, UVA rays, the more powerful ones that can do the most damage, they account for about 95% of what reaches the earth. So it's something we need to be aware of and protect ourselves from. It's not just affecting that outer layer of skin and giving us a glow. That's what you're going for. It's reaching down into your body and doing a lot of damage. Utilizing sunscreen, even on cloudy days or in the winter. So Kieran mentioned this as well. And the next point there points out the fact that UV rays, they reflect off water, they reflect off snow, they reflect off any light colored surface. And so wearing sunscreens is important, but also being aware of what's around you. If you're at the beach and you're on the water and you have, an umbrella over you to protect you, well, those UV rays are still coming up from the water, right? So you have to wear sunscreen as well as having, a cover from above. the body does not create a tan to be pretty. There's no evolutionary advantage to that. Again, it's a direct response to the damage that's going on at the cellular level. And, you know, to keep in mind that right now, skin cancer is actually the most common form of cancer in Canada. Every year, about 76,000 people are diagnosed with basal or squamous cell carcinomas, and about 8,000 people are diagnosed with melanoma. And every year, about 1,000 people will die of melanoma. So it's a very serious cancer. It's only going up. People tend to not take it as seriously as others because everyone wants to have that lovely glow. But it is very serious, and you should keep track of it. And the best piece of advice that I like to leave people with on this is that if you do have a new spot, lesion, or any changes to a mole on your skin, and it's been there for longer than 30 days, get it checked out by a doctor. Don't wait, because yeah, these numbers are very serious, and if you wait too long, it can be too late.
Thank you so much, Laura, for that little more deeper look at UV radiation. Great information, and we can't say it enough about protecting yourself, protecting your skin. I worked on many job sites as a carpenter where summertime we just had to go to the tool shack, and you know, they give us other forms of PPE, and they also had a thing there like little individual sunscreen we could just grab and put in our pouch and reapply throughout the day. So
yeah. And the other thing to mention too with SPF, just so people kind of understand what that means. One, you want to use a broad spectrum SPF. So that's going to cover the UVA and UVB. If it doesn't say broad spectrum, it's only going to cover one. And then the other thing with sunscreen is that it only takes about 2 tablespoons to do your whole body. And I totally just lost my train of thought there. So
no worries.
That sunscreen I was going to mention, but
yeah, if it comes back to you, you can mention it later. For sure, it's definitely a key component when working in the heat, and understanding if you're sweating and stuff, you are going to have to reapply.
Yes, and with the SPF factors, what that means is it's like, so for instance, if you say use SPF 30 sunscreen, that means it's going to take 30 times as long to burn you as it would without sunscreen. Same thing if it's SPF 100, it's 100 times longer. But what that means is it's not the same for different people. So, you know, I have a sister, she tans really easily. I do not, I just go straight to burning. So she can be out in the sun for a lot longer before she'll burn. I can be out there for like 20 minutes and I'll start to turn red. So the SPF factor is going to vary between me and her and how long or how effective it is. So it's not for everybody. Just keep in mind it's 30 or 50 or 100 times longer than it would normally take you to start burning.
Thank you, Laura. That's great information.
So that being said, Laura, then, you know, when they talk about SPF 60 and 100, so the benefits of 60 and 30 could very well be the same if you're applying it at the proper amount of time, right? Like in 40, after 4 hours, you should be reapplying anyway. So your SPF 30 could do just as effective as a job as the 60, depending on who you are.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're sweating or you're swimming, like those are all factors in that, right? And if if you have SPF 30 and you're reapplying it and using it as directed, then you're going to be just as fine as if you use 100 and only apply it once, right? So it matters what you're following on the bottle. And how, are you sitting out in the sun between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., which is like the most extreme parts of the day. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that affect it.
Awesome. That's great. Great information. Here's another picture we can discuss. This one I want to focus on clothing. What can we do in the summer? So you can see that they do have an improved attachment for their hard hat to protect their necks. Okay. They are wearing, looks like cotton long sleeve shirts. I know it's summer, but even those shirts can provide some protection from the sun. I know it's going to be hot, but it's still really good to wear long sleeve. as well.
Yeah, I think the important part is to note like what you are doing. So if you're doing a high intensity job, that might not be the most appropriate thing to wear, because your body only cools you when the sweat evaporates off of your skin. And the more convection you can get, which is wind, the more sweat that can evaporate. Another thing that affects that is the amount of skin you have showing. So if you only have your face is the only skin showing, that's how much you're going to sweat. So if you choose to wear long sleeve shirts in a very intense summer day, you're potentially opening yourself up to heat exhaustion, heat stroke. So you have to ensure that the proper things that you wear are appropriate to what you're doing.
Yes, for sure. So if you are going to wear and it's hot outside, and you do want to wear a long sleeve, definitely you're going to want to wear breathable material if possible, right? And sometimes I've worked for places, it's mandatory that you wear a long sleeve no matter what the temperature. It was mandatory. So I've been 40 above out there. And so you find the thinnest breathable material that you have to wear for those days.
Yeah. And there's a ton of stuff on the market now. I'm a big believer in long sleeves myself because I burn like it's nobody's business. So they have lots of moisture wicking options available that, you know, you wear these long sleeves and you think, oh my God, I'm going to die out here, but they keep you pretty cool actually. So there's a lot of options out there. And I think they're a lot better than risking the damage from the sun that it can do on your skin.
That's right. If you can find the proper clothing, I mean, you're not reapplying all the time. You're not forgetting to do that. It's just a permanent UV protection all day long. But, you know, like as Kieran pointed out, just make sure you're aware of the clothing that you're wearing, because you do need to be able to cool down. So, you know, if you're wearing the heavier equipment you got, if you're not in the cool down process, then you know, you're trading sunburn for heat exhaustion, basically, right? And you're trying to protect yourself from both. And another good thing is, you know, you guys should be watching out for each other. Sometimes you can tell that somebody else is burning a lot faster than they can, right? You know, you can tell when somebody's red. You know, I'm sure we've all been to the beach one day and, you know, you tapped your buddy or your wife on the shoulder and said, oh, geez, look at that guy. Look how red he is, right? You know, tell that person, right? Like, they're the ones that need to know. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's actually a lot of clothing companies out there and some Canadian ones even that their clothing actually has a UPF factor, it's called, and it's sort of just like an SPF. And so you can get clothes that are UPF 25 or UPF 50. So they actually offer quite a broad spectrum of UV protection. So, because I mean, there are some clothes that, you know, don't offer that, and they're, you know, the UV rays can penetrate the fabric. So another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, those are excellent points for sure. You definitely want to be aware of the clothing you're wearing and your surroundings and protect yourself, whether it be from the sun and heat exhaustion, both. Everybody's going to be different, right? So there's going to be different solutions for different people. So the next point I want to talk about here, I just have a picture here of some company vehicles. So let's talk about heat and company vehicles. If they've been out there all day, windows closed, what are some of the hazards you're going to be going into if you just jump in that vehicle?
Stale, hot air. It's horrible. Yeah. I mean, it's not going to kill you, but it'll definitely be uncomfortable. I do on occasion use my command start on hot days and leave my air conditioning on so that I can cool the vehicle down for a few minutes. And if that wasn't an option, I have just gone in, rolled the windows down, and given myself an extra 5 or 10 minutes to do something else while I wait for the car to cool down.
Definitely. Anybody else have experiences with hot vehicles on summer days? Whether it doesn't have to be a work truck, just even your personal vehicle.
Actually, now that I think about it, something that seems to always happen to my vehicle in the summer is I go up to my vehicle and it's covered in bees. every summer I've had these little patches of bees that they find their way to a car, and I can't remember what they're doing. I looked it up and it's like, oh, they're having some sort of like, I don't know, rain dance or something on my car. But that's another thing that happens. And it always happens in the summer, and it's happened every year to me where I have to like, you know, you just get in and drive and they fly away, I guess. But that's something else that has had happen quite a few times.
So that brings up a good point, regardless of the time of year. Do walk around your vehicle. Definitely. And it's important if you're going to be transporting your workers in a vehicle and it's been sitting out there and it's hot, and you open that up, depending what's in the vehicle, and in that heat, you may have some emission. It can actually be a little bit more of a toxic environment than you may know just going into that. So it's very important to air up their vehicle on a hot day, especially if they're sitting there for hours. Okay, the next slide here is going to be a great conversation. High temperature, and you mentioned this, Laura, a little bit ago, and Reed kind of doing your schedule so you don't have to work at the hottest time of the day. We understand the weather's great, we can get things done, but the hazards associated when it's 40 above, 35 above, right? And you're taking that extra risk. What are some solutions we can advise, or ideas we can give to our companies?
Yeah, I mean, I would just talk about, you know, splitting shifts up, right? If you can, I know when I worked in the field during the summer months, we came to work at, you know, 5:30 or 6 in the morning instead of 8, because we could start our work earlier. There was light, and it was a lot cooler. And then we can leave, you know, a little bit earlier in the day when it's really, really extremely hot. So that wasn't uncommon. I did that on quite a few sites where they changed the shifts. You know, the managers would, you know, try and work it where, like we had talked in previous slides, that they could do the work inside during, you know, between 10 and 2, and come back outside in the later afternoon or whatever the case may be. So changing your schedules, changing the work locations, you know, all of those things can help, because, you know, you don't want to have somebody out there burning or, you know, getting heat exhaustion or heat stroke, because that is very, very serious. It's not, you know, I know people tend to think, oh, I had heat stroke. It was really hot yesterday, I had heat stroke. But no, if you have heat stroke, you're going to the hospital. It's a very serious thing, and you can die from it. So it's something you should work at protecting people against.
And Steve, you had mentioned too that you had some experience working, and you guys also made a choice to work a little bit different hours.
I think he's having some technical issues.
It's very possible.
There's a storm rolling over Regina right now, so.
Yeah, it is storming outside. So he'll be back with us in a minute. So definitely.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Steve.
Yeah, like you said, I just heard you saying storming outside. Yeah, so we're doing a webinar on heat and heat exhaustion, and I just heard some thunder and everything. The power just went out in the house here. So all sorts of things to consider when you're working outside. I noticed the screen you got on here, and I did catch a piece of Laura talking about splitting shifts. I actually have a personal story of that. We were, you know, framing a large project, and we were all working out of town and camping in a Lethbridge work site, and it was 40 degrees above. And that's exactly what we did. We talked to everybody on the crew. You know, there had to have been 20 of us, and it was a unanimous decision to start as soon as the bylaws would allow. I mean, you always still have to think about the community you're working in and noise bylaws and stuff, but as soon as we could, we would start. A couple of us would get there a half hour early because you didn't have to worry about noise when you're rolling out boards and stuff like that and getting everybody ready. You'd hit the ground hard, and then at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, we would stop and we would go back to the campground and just chillax in the pool and cool off, and then go back to the job site around 5. And it was the best decision we made. Everybody was happier about it. We were working out of town anyways, so I mean, it takes stuff like that, because when you're going back to your trailer, it's easy to go back to work. If you're going home, you might not get 100% return from your employees, but you're not going to get 100% return on your employees if you make them work all day in the heat. They're going to call in with heat exhaustion the next day. So I would much rather lose a couple guys just because, you know, they just didn't feel like coming back to work the next day than to find out that they had heat exhaustion and they're going to miss the rest of the week. So.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Great points of changing. And, you know, companies have that, you know, flexibility if they can. And especially if there's no shade, there's nothing they can do, get out of the heat. And then if they can do that. Another one too is have multiple shifts, right? So have a shift come on and they're working. And then when it gets hot, you know, they get done or take their break different. And they have a fresh shift comes in who hasn't been in the heat all day, work for a few hours and move around too as well. So you can do that as well. I have one more. Go ahead.
Oh, it's going to be one thing that, you know, hasn't been brought up yet. We talked about getting into the shade. That should include any metal tool you had. Like that was honestly something that if when we were framers. So, I mean, you had your pass load guns and you had your squares and all these metal items that if you didn't bring these into the shade with you, they were untouchable when you got back to work. And trying to get guys to wear gloves in 30 plus weather just doesn't make sense. That's just another area, like you're just sweating too much. So to keep your tools in the shade as much as possible too really helps, because you will instantly burn your hands if you touch some of that stuff that's been hanging out in the metal or in the sun for too long.
That is an excellent point, Steve. The tools do get hot for sure. I guess the last slide here I have is, let's say you're not outside, but you're working and it's hot. There's no air conditioning in this building. It's coming up. Supplying adequate ventilation. Get that, you know, get a breeze going. That's going to make the world a difference.
Yeah, I always think of it like wind chill, right? The wind chill factor, you know, we use that because the wind blows away that like half an inch of warm air that's around our body and makes it feel more cold than it actually is. And it's like exact same thing we're going to be doing with heat inside of a building. If you could just get the air moving, and so guys feel, you know, the cool air moving around, even if it's not necessarily actually cooler, but that movement makes it feel a little bit cooler than it actually is and can make it a lot more comfortable to work in than if it's just hot, stagnant air.
Yes, very important.
That's to do with the evaporative rate, right? So that adds in metabolic rate, geez, I can't even speak right now. Adds in convection, which is like Laura said, like thinking like a wind chill, and radiant heat. So radiant heat being things that will heat objects. So using those three things, that's how we can determine how much we're gonna sweat and our sweat rate and how cool we're gonna stay. Humidity also is a big factor, because if it's too humid, the air cannot take any more water. So your sweat won't evaporate and you'll just become a sticky mess. So in humid, hot, different environments without ventilation, make sure to take the appropriate amount of breaks and work with your guys to figure out a good solution. Because if you don't, worse things than missing 15 minutes will happen, like Steve said.
Yeah, that's for sure. Excellent point. So that's going to conclude today our webinar Wednesday. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned. Join us on Tuesday. So Tuesday, Toolbox Talk is going to be, Laura is going to be actually presenting on mental health during a pandemic, right? So
Tuesday at 10 a.m.
Okay, so that'll be great. And we'll be back again for the webinar on Wednesday. Thank you everybody for joining us, and have a safe day.